This week, the Antiques Roadshow returns to Wiltshire, but there's something big missing. Any ideas? It's the house itself. The original Bowood house near Chippenham was razed to the ground in the 1950s, and what you see now, gorgeous though it is simply a type of conservatory, an orangery. In its heyday, this Wiltshire estate, home to the Marquesses of Lansdowne, would have employed dozens of servants. With 90 rooms, Bowood House was large enough to rival any in the country. The upstairs-downstairs lifestyle of much of the aristocracy became unsustainable during the early part of the 20th century. Death duties and the loss of many heirs and the many worked on the estates during the two world wars meant that life had changed. The great houses became white elephants in danger of extinction. When the bulldozers pulled up at Bowood in 1955 to demolish the main house, it was the end of an era. The family had already been living in what was known as the Little House for many years as the main house became dilapidated, and wisely they saved as many treasures as possible. These days, while the Marquess of Lansdowne still lives at Bowood, the majority of the house is dedicated to a museum and gallery, and the family's precious art collection has been shared with visitors since the house opened its doors to the public in the mid-1970s. For a small house, Bowood has a big reputation. In fact, when our experts heard we were coming here, there was a real buzz of excitement. There's something to please everyone in the collection. Fine diamond jewellery, Indian antiques, museum-quality porcelain, even Queen Victoria's wedding chair. Sounds like the perfect fancy roadshow. With finds like those vying for our experts' attention, let's hope today's visitors to the Antiques Roadshow come up with the goods.
You brought in this tiny little box and many, many questions. Now, hopefully on the Antiques Roadshow we can answer most questions, but I think with this one I'm going to be at a bit of a loss. But tell me its history to begin with.
Okay, well, I bought this in on behalf of my father. He bought it with my late mother. It was one of the first things they bought when they were married. He bought it from Petticoat Lane in London for about £20 or £30, which was quite a lot of money for him then. And they just found it really enchanting because there's a code on one of the sides, a sort of numerical code that he's never been able to crack. And we just wondered really what the story was about it.
Good. Okay, well, let's get some clues. It's got a name on the top, which I read as J. Jones. Now that was the person who probably gave it, because every time you took it out and used it, you would remember that particular person. If you open the lid, and there's a little compartment in there, could be for snuff, it's quite airtight, could be for something else. But there's another clue. If you open up the back, there's another similar compartment with a glass panel on it and just a trace of silvering. So I think that's a mirror. So what would you need a mirror for?
Something cosmetic?
Spot on! So it could be for rouge or for patches. Okay, in the 18th century, patches were used to cover up pock marks, if you had a blemish on your face, or they were used in order to signify if you were married or not. So if you had a patch on the left cheek or the right cheek, meant you were either engaged or married. If it was beside your eye, it meant you were passionate. And if it was in your forehead, it means you were quite serious. So it was a code, we talk about codes, it was a code to actually signify socially where you stood, without actually having to ask somebody or chat them up. You immediately knew if they were married or not. So, fascinating thing. What I really like, though, is the motto that goes round the outside.
Yes, it says something like, "The ring is round and hath no end, so unto my love, now my friend," or the other way around, but something along those lines.
So I think that answers many of the questions. We also know the date, because it's here on the top, 1785. And then it's got a chain of numbers. Now that's the enigma. What is that? Maybe it's his mobile phone number. So that's a question I cannot answer. What is it? A patch box, but also a love token. So how apt that it was a present from your father to your late mother.
Yes.
How enchanting. Lots of sentimental value. Commercially, probably £800 to £1,200 today.
Gosh, that's a shock. I'm sure my dad will be pleased, but it really is sort of, I think, the sentimental value more than anything.
Brilliant.
We have the archetypal piece of local interest here, Devizes Comprehensive Wiltshire. And this caption to this cartoon reads, Miss Hoskins, you know we're not allowed to use the cane in the school, and here is Miss Hoskins, nearly naked, with a cane, and there's a paw. What is it, a lion?
Yes. In 1980, April 1980, when I was a student at Devizes School, I am a current member of staff at Devizes School also.
Right.
2 lions escaped from the circus.
From the circus, of course, in Devizes, there's that big...
the green next door to school,
Yes.
and the obvious place for lions to wander when they've escaped is a school. And they came into school during a lunch break, and obviously caused havoc.
To say the least.
Yes, and managed to find their way into 2 classrooms where students were eating their lunch, and eventually were rounded up by members of staff, shut into classrooms. The circus staff came and rescued them.
And who owned the circus?
It was Sally Chipperfield Circus. I think there's a little piece on there. There's a little poster.
Sally Chipperfield Circus,
Yeah,
school visit.
And in those days, school visit, yeah.
I love it.
It was, yeah. In those days, they still had wild animals in the circus.
Well, it's by Jack, of course, the great cartoonist
Yes.
of the Evening Standard.
Right.
Raymond Jackson was his name, and he was doing these for about 30 odd years. And it's rather like Giles-like. Do you remember
Yes.
Giles, who did all those wonderful cartoons at schools?
Yeah.
Are the teachers something like this today, do you think?
Well,
It's sort of
similar.
terribly inelegant. I think it's absolutely wonderful. And so the lions, they didn't eat any of the children.
No, the only casualty apparently was a cheese and pickle sandwich. Yeah.
Oh, I think it's a wonderful story. And this sits in pride of place in the school.
Yes, in the school reception
And
area.
you're going to ask me to value it, aren't you?
Yes.
Well, Jack Cartoons, he's one of the greats in the 20th century. He was an emotional man, and one of his signatures, actually, is 3 fingers.
Right.
Known as Three-Fingered Jack. And you notice that everybody's got 3 fingers?
Oh, yes.
They've only got 3 fingers. Anyway, all his cartoons, 3 fingers. So I'm going to value this somewhere between £300 and £500.
Wow.
Lock it up.
Yes. We'll nail it to the wall.
It's a great piece.
It's lovely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you ever so much. Thank you.
Well, it's the original box of a Christmas present to my grandmother from her prospective husband, containing a Royal Worcester basket.
Oh, how fantastic.
For Christmas 1914.
And look at this, porcelain with great care from the Royal Worcester Porcelain Company Limited, Worcester, fragile. Obviously the address there. This is so lovely.
December the 21st.
Oh, I love this. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would love to know the contents of this box, but I would be depriving the Sandons of that moment. Well, I think that they are going to be very excited to see this later. A really nice thing and a really lovely survivor. And later on we'll see what's in there as well. Thank you ever so much. Thank you.
A pair of goats pulling a chariot. How long have you known them?
I've known them most of my life. They were in my grandmother's house when I first went there when I was about age 10. And they were on top of a desk in the drawing room. And my grandmother died, and my mother put them on the top of the desk in her drawing room. And my mother died, and I got them on the top of the desk in my drawing room. So but I know very little about them, apart from the fact that they belong to my grandmother.
And what kind of woman was your grandmother?
She was very Victorian, very austere, very straight. And sadly, I never knew my grandfather, but she was not the person to be argued with.
Okay. And so do you feel these reflect her as a person?
Not really, because they're known in the family as the loony goats, and my grandmother wasn't a loony goat. I'm afraid, no way.
Have you ever looked at how they're made?
Well, they seem a bit sort of cheap to me. They're sort of pressed. There's no substance to them. They're not solid.
They're very, as you say, they're quite insubstantially made. They're just stamped out of sheet metal, and then part of it, the chariot, has been gilded, and the goats themselves plated, which is why they've tarnished. But the good thing is nobody's ever really tried to clean it. But yes, it's very insubstantial, and I'm sort of amazed that they've managed to sort of stay intact with all the little bits of wire around them.
There is a glass dome that goes over the top of it.
Yes.
And somebody was suggesting the glass dome might be worth more than they are. I don't know.
And do you know what this is?
Well, it's a scent bottle.
It's a scent bottle, yes. It's just a very decorative way of making a holder for a scent bottle. The bottle itself is green glass with gilt paint, and really it doesn't look as though it's ever been used, does it?
No.
And so they were made in France around 1890, a real little French frivolity. Either someone in your family might have gone out there and bought them, or they might have been exported to England and sold as a rather exotic sort of decorative little item.
Yes.
As a novelty, they're worth about £300.
Oh, never, surely. I mean, to me, they're just sort of two loony goats. They're £300, right? Thank you very much.
I really love objects that encapsulate the time and place they were intended for. And looking at this collection here, that could only really be America in the 1950s.
I've always been a collector, and particularly I'm interested in design history, and I love the style of them, and also the fact that they're functional, they work. So
you actually listen to them?
I listen to nearly all of them. I have them in all different rooms of the house. Much to my wife's irritation, because although I have about 100, she can't listen to the Archers on any of them, because that's broadcast on long wave, and these are all medium wave.
Of course. From a design perspective, as you were saying, it's a very interesting collection, because these are more than just objects of technology, they're also objects of fashion. The pocket transistor radio is completely contemporary with the arrival of the teenager in American society. The first transistor radios were manufactured in the States from 1954. 1956, the Japanese get in on the act, and they really make it their own. I think I'm correct in saying that the majority that we have here are actually Japanese models.
They are indeed, yes.
And I think the Japanese, really, why they become so successful is because they've got this mastery of producing decorative things. And we've got this lovely example here, Bulova, with atomic age styling on the dial, lovely cream body, and this chrome highlight there, which really recalls 1950s automobile design. They're also quite telling of the period in which they were made politically. Now, I gather some of these markings, these arrows on the dial of the Bulova, have a particular meaning. Can you tell me more about those?
Yes, it was the Cold War period in America, and it was deemed by the government that these arrows indicated the frequency you had to tune into for important announcements in the event of a nuclear war.
Wow.
In case the Russians shut down all the other stations, that you would get your announcements on those points on the wavelength.
They are really lovely things, and of course we move from these objects of real finesse, actually. The Bulova especially is really quite a stylish piece, to the more novelty. I mean, this is pure kitsch of 1950s America. It really is the owl. Wonderful piece with these eyes that will light up.
They do light up
when it's used. It's not going to show up in the sunlight, but a really, really lovely, fun thing. Moving on to value. I mean, these vary quite dramatically. Probably the Bulova is the most valuable, about £200 to £300. The other examples, roughly £100 each. I think just the novelty value of this alone gives you that kind of value. But it is a lovely, lovely collection. In fact, this is quite a nice one here. How do you switch this on?
very seldom do I see something on the Roadshow that I actually own myself, but I've got one of these at home, and it's a great piece of amusement, isn't it? Still.
The grandchildren love it.
What's this circuit board?
Okay, this is part of the RCA 110. This was the launch computer that launched the Saturn V's that went to the moon, obviously.
Oh my God.
It says in here, Wheel of Life. We probably know it better as a zoetrope, but what it is actually is an optical toy through which you get this magic of movement.
So what about these parts here?
So these are parts of the Saturn V itself.
Right.
The Saturn V was split into multiple stages, and one of the stages had a computer circuit ring in it, and these are parts of the computer that was on that.
These are proper space-flown pieces.
Absolutely.
William Horner, and he was the guy responsible in the 1830s. Local lad, wasn't he? Horner.
Bath. He was born in Bath.
Yeah.
And he died in Bristol.
I'm an astronomer, and I used to work for the European Space Agency, and I've also done some writing work for NASA, and I've met a lot of the Apollo moonwalkers.
And value with all these strips here, I put it at around £500 to £700.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, but it's not for sale.
Well, fortunately I've got one, so I don't need another.
Space memorabilia is just going up and up and up. And I reckon, there's probably £2,000 or £3,000 worth of material here without too much trouble. It's just brilliant.
And what have we got here? Oh, we've got the man who takes his head off and passes it along.
This is a most extraordinary box. I haven't seen one of these for a long time. Made by the Porcelain Works at Worcester for sending things in. How did you come by it?
Well, it's the box of a Christmas present to my grandmother for Christmas 1914.
Miss A. Fenton was
my grandmother.
Grandmother.
Yeah.
I say, it's come all the way from Worcester. And what does it contain?
It's a Royal Worcester porcelain basket.
That's the box. And here is the basket.
That's the basket.
My word, there we are. And with a flower basket for putting flowers in. You put roses or daffs or whatever you want to do into the basket. And it's absolutely beautiful. They have made a number of these. These are quite a common shape. I see these quite often. But it's very nice. Do you think the present of this led to the wedding?
I'm sure it helped, yes.
Well, God bless the basket. And value, of course, it's inestimable in the family, isn't it? Because this led to you, eventually.
Eventually, yes.
But in value, about 300, 400 pounds. The box is probably more valuable than the pot. It's wonderful. Thank you so very much for bringing it in.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're interested in it. Thank you.
What's the significance of bees, Lady Lansdowne?
Well, the bees I collect because Sir William Petty, his crest was a beehive. So the Petty bees have always been part of our family crest.
And Sir William Petty?
Sir William Petty was Cromwell's Chancellor.
So bees have always been a very potent symbol.
Busy bees, a potent symbol.
Busy bees, yes. Indeed. And you like wearing them?
I love wearing them. I have lots of them, and I scatter them all around rather sort of randomly in a rather sort of bizarre way.
Interesting word, scatter. Because these things were made at the end of the Victorian period. In fact, your two bees that you have here are late Victorian, classic late Victorian designs. Gold and silver, studded with diamonds in the wings and in the body. Except that what's interesting is that one of the bees is set with rubies, and one of the bees is set with sapphires. They're nearly identical, but not quite. As far as the question of scatter, it's an interesting thing also to note that they're always going to be worn on your dress, but also they were worn on things like parasols. So they were called scatterbugs, and you would scatter them all over your clothes and on your accessories. So you can imagine you're walking down the road and you've got this bug on your parasol. Oh my goodness, we look at that and it becomes a little conversation piece. You get the idea. The other way that these are worn is worth pointing out. This ruby and diamond one in its original fitted box, if we lift up the block, we notice it's got the original. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that was in there.
You didn't know it was in there? Well, that is a hair comb fitting. In other words, you would screw the hair comb fitting to the back of the bee, and you would put it at the back of your bum, and there it would tremble naturalistically. The Victorians were very practical people. Right, if they were being sold together as two bees, you would be looking at £12,000 to £15,000 today.
Well, they're not going anywhere.
I doubted that they would. I doubt that they would, but I can tell you, they're very nice bees.
Thank you.
My grandparents travelled extensively pre-war and obviously ended up in Cairo at one point. And my grandfather, who loved to collect beautiful things, bought this canopic jar.
Yeah, well, I collect scarabs, but I've never had the luck to find one of these. But as you know, as you've just said, it's a canopic jar. And you probably know, these jars were put in the tombs of embalmed bodies with the embalmed vital organs inside each one of them, because there were 4. This is one of 4. And each one of the 4 jars would have had a different head representing one of the 4 sons of Horus. And Horus was one of the most important gods in the Egyptian pantheon of deities. And he was like a sky god, and as you've probably heard of the Eye of Horus, the wedged eye, well, this is one of his sons, and this son is called Seti, and this one would have contained the liver. And they left the heart, actually, in the mummified body, because they believed that the heart could be tested to see if the person had had a good life, and they tested it by weighing it with a feather. And if the heart was lighter than the feather, then they'd had a good life and they could pass through into the next world. And they're usually either made of alabaster, calcite, or limestone. And this one's alabaster, as this is the receipt, isn't it, for it?
Yes.
From what date was this?
1935.
1935. I mean, this is really good provenance. And it's from an antiquities merchant called Abdi El Baki El Gabri, excuse my pronunciation.
Better than mine.
It says here, the undersigned Abdi Baki Ali El Gabri hereby declares solemnly that the undermentioned antiquities have been sold to E.J. Saville of Cairo.
My grandfather.
That's your grandfather. And the top piece here is the alabaster canopic jar, sold for £5 sterling. In 1935. That's remarkable to have that. This type is usually from the 19th dynasty. That's about 1290 to 1180 BC. That's the time of Ramses and Set. So if it's confirmed, which I'm sure it is, that it's from that date, it could make £4,500, and it could possibly make more.
It's amazing. I hadn't expected that.
This is kind of a magic moment, really, because I know the story here, and you've got all this sea of faces, and we're about to start talking about your dad.
That's right, Andy, yes.
And it's magic. Come on, off you go. Tell us about your dad.
This is my dad, Samuel Batchelor. He was born in 1898, and at age 15, he was apprenticed to Royal Brierley Crystal in Brierley Hill, where I was also born.
Stourbridge.
Part of Stourbridge Glass, that's right. Unfortunately, he was called up for World War I service, where he was unfortunately gassed and a POW. So when he came back to work, he was always short of breath, but he continued work. And in 1939, Stephen and Williams, or Royal Brierley Crystal, brought out a prototype, and there were only 3 made. One went to King George VI, the other went to Saudi Arabia, and this one was on my father's bench when World War II broke out. The factory closed. It didn't reopen until 1947. And when he got back to his bench, there was this. So he took it home with him, and I have it.
Isn't it magic?
This is part of his work. It's called intaglio, which is not quite the same as a deep cut. He was presented after 40 years service with this wonderful vase.
With a fat pension, of course.
No pension at all. He retired. Sadly, he only lived 4 years after his retirement because his breath wasn't very good.
Well, bearing in mind, I mean, many of those who were gassed in the First World War never made it back to anywhere.
Fortunately, he made his home, otherwise I wouldn't be here.
So you're telling a story
I'm
about
telling the
this.
story about my dad, Samuel Batchelor, and I'm Brian Batchelor.
Well, it's very nice to have you here, Brian. Sweet. Well, look, what we're talking about is really this enormous... Your dad is a representative of this enormous number of highly skilled craftsmen.
That's right.
Who were employed in 100,000 industries across this country as engineers or body shop painters. Correct. Or gilders or intaglio glass engravers. And the method for intaglio is different, as you say, to cutting. This is cut crystal.
Yes.
But this is intaglio cut crystal.
Intaglio crystal.
And what you did is that on these they used rotating wheels.
That's right. He sat at his workbench like that. And he could print your name on a vase or on a piece of a water tumbler, just like that.
And he had to do it in reverse because the way that he worked is that the wheel, the turning wheel, was here.
That's
and
right.
he had to cut that mirror.
That is correct.
So he had to learn just the entire alphabet plus dates and all the rest of it in reverse.
That's right.
And if that isn't a skill, I don't know what you think is,
right.
you know. And so what you do, he would have padded donuts.
His elbows had to rest on two
I'm telling you guys, if you put your elbows on
like
the table
all day
from his entire career,
from 7:30 until 5:30 every day doing this.
Breathing in lead crystal dust up his hooter on top of the mustard gas that the Germans had stuck up his hooter.
That's right. Yes.
And the skills is fabulous. I mean, it doesn't take much to work out that is a beautiful thing, isn't it? I mean, it really is. The fact it's for putting fags in.
That's right.
You know, there would be 10 soldiers with fags pointing out of this is what it is.
Yes.
So I tell you, the value of this stuff is, it's pitiful. I mean, it's just, I barely can bring myself to say that it's not worth 100 quid. It's not. But the fact is that you represent tens of thousands of people who've come down the generations from a job from grandpa, a job to pa, a job to myself, and it's all gone. 5,000 in Stourbridge to 5 today.
Thomas Webb and Corbett has gone, so has Stuart Crystal. And they were all there working away in the 20s, 30s.
And what a pleasure it is to be here on the Antiques Roadshow just to catch that snapshot of you and your dad.
That's right.
It's blooming great. Cheers, Gov.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
He brought in this beautiful Japanese album, but actually it relates to a different country rather than Japan.
Yes, it was related to China. My great-uncle went over there in 1897, and he was over in China as a missionary, but he was in there during the time of the Boxer Uprising.
Fantastic. Well, is he portrayed here?
Yes, this is him.
This gentleman in the back, pointing in the camera. And this is dated May the 5th, 1905. Is it given as a gift?
It was sent as a birthday present, yes.
Now, it's absolutely full of images that he actually took while out there.
Yes.
And what's interesting about that is it was a very important part of history. The Boxer Revolution.
Yes.
It was a time when the Chinese wanted to get out of all Western influence.
That's right. They were against all the foreign nationals, especially trade, and the missionaries as well. So they decided to kill them.
So an international force was put together. I think it was the Americans and the British. And,
there were quite a few, yes.
Quite a few.
I think that I mentioned, I saw something about German forces as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because they all had interests in China, so it was important that they supported their interests. So we'll just open up another few images. Here is this distinguished-looking gentleman here.
Yes.
Who's he?
One of the generals who negotiated the escape of my uncle and his family from the mission where he was serving during the Boxer Rebellion. They had to flee where they were, and these people are the bodyguard before they left.
So he was very lucky to escape with his life.
He was very lucky to escape with his life. There were 100 and odd missionaries and families killed.
And here's an image of
the house that he went back to, complete ruin.
Was he a man of daring do?
Well, I don't know. He spent a couple of years later in Outer Mongolia as a missionary, seeing what it was like out there, and sort of arrived in Hawaii, America. But yes, he was a very capable person.
Well, I think this is a very important document. I mean, none of these photographs have ever been published before. No. They're all done by him.
Yes.
It's, this went on to create the beginning of the Chinese Republic.
Oh, yes, he saw the birth of the Chinese Republic when he was over there. Yes.
So the people who are interested today are modern-day Chinese.
Well, that's right, yes.
So an important document. It's potentially worth, at auction, between certainly £1,000 and £1,500.
Oh, right, I didn't even think it would be worth that, but as I said, it's the family value of the person that he became, yes.
I know. Yes. But lovely to see it, and thank you so much for bringing it in.
Thank you very much, then.
You've got some medals here from a Private Emmett Carson from the 101st Airborne. Who is he?
This man is my biological father, who I found after 10 years of searching.
How did you find out about him?
I was clearing out my mother and father's loft. They passed away within 6 months to each other, and I happened to be up there clearing out the loft, and I found these airmail letters from Emmett to my mother.
When you read these letters, what did you find out?
Well, I found out that the father I thought was my father wasn't. But he was a wonderful man that brought me up.
And no one had ever told you this?
No.
Gosh, that must have been a shock.
I'm afraid that everybody in the family was told secretly. I wasn't to find out. So
you found out
50 years old, and I find out that poor old dad is not my dad. But this GI that lives in North Carolina is my biological father.
Gosh, that's like an earthquake in your life.
I was very distraught for a couple of years, and I had to find him. There's something inside that said to me, I've got to find him.
And so did you find your biological father?
I found the family, but sadly he had died in between times.
And that's how you got these medals, is it?
Yeah. When I was there, my cousin said to me, look, when he died, the military flag was put on his coffin, and they were coffin bearers, and it was given to him because he was military. And he said to me, look, you are his son. You should have them.
And tell me about the photograph album that you found.
The first time we went there, my lady cousin said to me, do you want to look at the family Bible? It happened to be the photograph album of the whole family from about 1870 up to the modern day. And I'm looking through it, and we're going to say, that's your great-grandpa, that's your grandma, and all this. And he said, we came to this photograph of this lady, and she said, we don't know who this is, she said, but it's in the album. And I said, well, I know, this is my mother.
Goodness.
So, obviously, Emma had put it in the album.
So what does it mean to you to have these and to have the flag that was on his casket?
Well, I can't explain it really. It's unexplainable because it's all down here. You know, I get emotional about it still now, as you can see. It just means I was lucky. I had two fathers. One that gave me life, and one that brought me up. So I was very fortunate.
During my 30 years of the Roadshow, and I don't remember seeing early playing cards like these, and you have collected them.
I have indeed, yeah.
Tell me what started it.
Well, initially it was an interest in history, a passing interest in playing cards. And about 20 years ago, I bought a replica pack, which you can buy for about £5, of actually this one. Subsequently,
I managed to go online and go to an auction, and I picked up these first, which is just 20, obviously, of a set of 52. So going to auctions, seeing what the dealer has to offer, I managed to collect them.
And did you collect the rest of the set?
I haven't been able to find the rest of the set yet, so there's 32 I've still got to find.
Gosh, so you've got a target.
I have got a target.
These ones, I think, are earlier, aren't they?
They are. They're for an earlier period, and it's called the Knavery of the Run.
So this, as you know, is the front of the pack, but it's a facsimile. It's not the real one, and it's showing the title of the pack, which is The Knavery of the Rump, which is basically cocking a snook at Cromwell and his Parliament.
That's right. There are a lot of vignettes here which are showing things that happened, satirical things that happened at the time, and
very
you can go
entertaining.
back. It is entertaining.
Yes.
You can go back on the history and actually find out more about just that 3 lines, and it can tell you so much more about what was really happening at the time.
Absolutely, and actually, I'm a bit ignorant. Who was Lady Lambert, who was being very strong with Oliver?
I've absolutely no idea.
Oh, fantastic. And all these are part of this 50 pack, and you've just got 2 to get.
I have got 2 to find somewhere.
Well, now, I recognise these wonderful illustrations, probably from etchings, by Francis Barlow, who was known as the first English illustrator of books. But he was a painter, etcher and illustrator, and he was so brilliant with his political sketches. And you got these wonderful ones. You don't really need to play a game. You can just pass them round in a gentleman's club, although I think they probably played rummy and whist.
Yes.
But they are so amusing. You want to look at them and not pass them on.
They can take up a bit of time looking at them.
Absolutely. I do happen to know that a set of these, you say you've only got 50 out of the 52.
I've got 50 out of 52 of those, yeah.
And these are 1685.
About that.
Well, I'm just going to stick my neck out on these, because let's assume you're going to get the last 2. These are going to be worth £12,000.
Right. Okay.
The interesting part for me is that the later ones, which were the Marlborough ones, these ones, I think those were also by Francis Barlow. They're much more intricate, but I think he got better and better as he got on in his life. And in the same way, you have got how many of these?
I've got a full set of those.
Again, maybe 6,000 to 8,000.
Right.
So you've got, say, 12,000 here.
Yeah.
Say 7,000 there, so that's 19,000.
Right.
What did you pay for these?
About 1,200.
1,200. Well, they've gone up since you bought them.
Right.
When did you buy them?
They're about 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, I think we're going to go to 3,000 for these.
Right.
And counting.
Right.
It's so exciting and wonderful for the Roadshow, because we haven't had anything like this before.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting to show
and wonderful
people.
for me. I never stop learning.
No. Okay.
Thank you very much for bringing them.
Thank you, buddy.
It feels like all the fun of the fair today, doesn't it? With the tents and the excitement building and the sunshine. And there's nothing more linked to a fairground, I guess, than one of these, a fairground horse. What's the story for you?
Well, I bought it at auction about 8 years ago, and I go to auctions fairly regularly. I've never seen one before, and I just fell in love with it. I thought if I don't buy it, I'm never going to see another one. So it was catalogued as a 19th century carousel horse. I don't really know much more about it than that. Somebody did tell me that it, because it faces to the right, it's American, but that's all I know about it, really, so I was hoping you could tell me a bit more about it.
Sure. Well, that's an interesting point that you've made, because it is facing this way, which is basically anti-clockwise round a carousel. Now, most horses that you see are designed to go the other way, clockwise, and that's a little indication that it could be American. The American horses had the romance side, that's the highly decorated side, on the outside, and also being so highly decorated, I think this is probably from the outer layer. You know, there are probably 3 layers of horses, certainly 2, and he would have been on the outer layer. The carousel comes from a Middle Age system of training knights, where knights would gallop on horses and try and hit things that were put in a circle around them. And that was called a carosella, a little battle. And from that came this, really, a derivation of that particular word. Now, you bought it, what, as a piece of sculpture almost?
I just bought it because I love it, really. And I suppose it's a piece of sculpture, and it was, I bought it at a time when I had more disposable income than I have now, and I just fell in love with it and thought I wouldn't see another one. And I justified it by the fact that it's cheaper to keep than a real horse and doesn't need mucking out. So, yeah, I went for it, and I was hesitant to tell people how much I paid for it because it was a lot of money, but I love it.
So, let's think about it. It's a late 19th century American carousel horse from, I think, one of the collectible makers, Stencil. So I think that I'd put a figure of £3,000 to £5,000 on it as a sort of middling estimate, but knowing that the market is in the States for these, and it may be that if the right person out there sees it, it could take off. But it's not something I can see is going to cross the Atlantic anytime soon.
No, I don't think I'll ever be able to get rid of it. But that's good to hear because I paid less than that, so that's a relief.
Very good. Well, we like a happy, smiling face when we give a valuation. Excellent. Well, thanks very much for bringing it in, and I hope it continues to give you lots of pleasure, and for this one too, as she grows into it.
I think she'll probably claim it at some stage as her own.
So obviously, I can see you've got some programmes.
Yes,
they're in Italian. What?
They are. At the end of the war, my grandfather was in Rome, and they were all given 3 days off at the end of the war.
Oh,
and
right.
all his friends decided to go and enjoy the company of the local ladies. But my grandfather decided, because he'd never been, he would go to the opera, so he went 3 nights running.
Oh,
and these are the programmes.
And he went 3 nights running. Oh my God, he was obviously a very cultured gentleman.
He was wonderful. He was absolutely wonderful. So,
what a fantastic story.
So I'm sure they're probably not worth anything, but I just think I love the story.
That's
great, and
yes.
the fact that he kept them and brought them back. You know,
it obviously had a very strong impact on him.
Absolutely,
Yes,
absolutely.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, well, I hope you have a great day today.
Thank you very much.
I'm supposed to be very happy to look at them for
Thank
you.
you.
Sure.
Thank you.
This huge leather-bound volume looks like a monster book, doesn't it? In fact, it says Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. But further down it says a motion picture, which of course is quite strange. So let's open it up and have a look. If you don't mind supporting that.
Of course.
This is signed to Anne Waddington from Alice in Wonderland. And what this is, in fact, is an amazing presentation script for the 1933 Paramount film Alice in Wonderland. The title page there is amazing, but before we talk about that, tell me a little bit about how you came to have this.
Now, this used to be my great-grandmother's, who passed it on to my mother.
Right.
The book is signed from Alice in Wonderland, the actual actress herself, so we believe it was given to a friend of my great-grandmother, and when my mum saw it, I think she said she was 17 years old, and said, oh my gosh, this is absolutely amazing. And so my great-grandmother said, well, you can have it. So I gave it to her, and she's just had it in the house all these years and never really knew what to do with it. So my husband and I thought we'd take it down and find out a bit more if we can about it.
Well, I don't think I've ever seen a script quite like this, a presentation script.
Beautiful, isn't it?
If we look at this frontispiece, we can see that we've got very early Cary Grant here. We've got W.C. Fields. And actually, let's turn a little bit further, because I think this was probably made perhaps to present to some sponsors or something like that. Because what it is, it's a complete storyboard as well, with characters, costumes, storyboarded out with all of the script. It really is a magnificent thing. Now, to be frank with you, having seen nothing like this before, and I've seen quite a few movie scripts, it's quite difficult to try and kind of think about what something like this is worth. But you know, I'm going to put £5,000 to £8,000 on this.
Oh I won't give it back to my mum. I'm off.
It really is a staggeringly good piece of movie history, I think. And actually an absolute delight to see it.
Yeah.
So thanks ever so much.
Thank you very much. I'm off and running.
It's too heavy to run with.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Sorry, may I interrupt you a second? A matching pair.
I like this, I think it's quite sweet. What made you bring it here today?
Well, I collect pigs and I also collect busters, and I just wondered if it was worth anything. 126,
yes.
Simon and Halby, circa 1930. The flirty eye is going to be worth 400 to 600, and the one without the flirty eyes, even though they're twins, 3 to 5. 3 to 5.
Fantastic, that's great. Wonderful. Sorry to interrupt.
It was plated all over, it's cast brass, but heavy cast. Normally these are sheet metal. This is really nice.
They come from my grandfather. He used them to go and find, obviously, the girlfriend at the time.
Did the girlfriend at the time become your grandmother?
She did.
Oh, that's lovely.
And it's got a nice curly tail back there and little hooves. It's just nice.
I'm always known for lifting up dolls' dresses. I get teased like mad.
And what I like about it is the striker is inside the head. Normally the striker's on the side or on the belly, but it's inside there, and this is solid cast, this bit.
She's very grand, isn't she? She's got wonderful hair.
And it's just really nice. I suppose it's Edwardian, 1920s maybe.
Have you ever had her valued?
Half-heartedly.
Right, and?
They said 1,000.
Well, I'm going to say 2,000 to 3,000.
Worth about £200 to £250 to a collector.
That's good. He's called Harry, so I've had him since I was 8, and he's a member of our family. Oh, I'm not surprised. How do you do, Harry? You are very lucky. You are very lucky, and so are you.
Well, not only am I fascinated by jewellery, but I love architecture as well. And there's something about this necklace that really has an architectural feel, and almost a religious feel. So how did you come to have it?
It's a family piece that my grandmother inherited from an aunt of hers, and has come down through my grandmother and my mother to my sister and I. Part of this family was quite religious. Auntie Claire, whose necklace it was quite religious. Now, whether she actually had this piece made personally for her, or she inherited it from her mother, we don't know that. But all the stones actually do represent different saints.
That's right, because we've actually got a description here from the jewellers, Lewis Abbott, which relates to also the box, so we know that the two are combined, and it's not something that they've written after the purchase, which is great, isn't it? And it does say how important the saints were, and with relation to how they should have gems associated to them as well. And for many centuries we've known that gems are associated with months for birthdays and various love symbols through the Victorian period they were picked up on, and to see them associated with saints is really lovely. I mean, we can pick out also from this list here, which is in a different hand from the letter or description up here, so this must maybe have been done by her.
It may be done by her, or even my great-grandfather.
Yes, well, he studied it very carefully and has listed all the saints and also then related them to the stone that they're associated with and also the month that the stone's related to. So let's have a look here. We've got St Andrew associated with the sapphire, which of course is the stone associated with April, month of April, and there's the gorgeous sapphire just sparkling there. And then further down, if we just go down to St John, we've got emerald associated of course with the month of June, which is just there, lovely little stone there, and on it goes with all the different stones that we've got. So it's set in probably 9-carat gold because it's quite a nice pale gold, and all the detailing is very delicately done with the trefoil motifs that we see here. So a fun piece of jewellery, and date-wise it fits in around about the 1860s, 1870s.
Yeah.
So does it ever come out?
I wore it at my wedding.
Did you?
And I also wore it at Christmas to a Christmas do. Because I haven't told my sister that. But it was a high-end Christmas do. But yes, I have worn it occasionally, and I would wear it again because it's such a nice piece of jewellery to wear as well.
It is, isn't it? It's absolutely wonderful, and go with any outfit because of all the colours in there as well, so it's great. Now obviously it's a family piece. You're not going to sell it, are you? No, it's going to stay within the family. But I think in an auction environment, should it go in for sale, because of all the stones and the story and the fun side to it as well, we'd be looking at an estimate of around about £1,500 to £2,000.
I didn't think it was going to be as much as that.
It's not often on the Antiques Roadshow that we get to use, let alone wear, the items that we see. And you two, me and this mannequin, are wearing some fantastic 1930s and 1940s suits by Montague Burton.
Indeed.
But you look the whole part.
Thank you.
Tell me the story. How did you get into this?
Well, we're both sort of interested in the sort of tailoring industry, and we're both 30s and 40s reenactors. We go all over the country doing reenacting and sort of World War II events. And we just love the era. And
we love the clothing. It's, as you can see, we wear it most weekends.
Yeah, man.
But it's not just the clothing. I mean, literally from top to toe. The shoes, the trousers, the suit, the hair.
Yeah,
I mean, it's magnificent. What do your friends think? I mean, how old are you?
28.
Yeah, both of us 28.
Okay, what do they think of
it's a lot of the odds.
We've got a lot of friends who reenact with us who are used to it, and then our work colleagues and other friends just sort of go,
accept it,
Well, it was very much sort of a moment in history, a moment in fashion history, really.
Yeah.
Montague Burton came over, I think he came in 1900, shortly afterwards founded his company selling clothes in 1903, and was enormously successful. By 1929, hundreds of shops, mills, factories. I mean, he really sort of captured that moment of sort of, in a way, would you say tailoring for the masses?
Yeah, definitely tailoring for the masses and sort of allowing the everyday man to buy a tailor-made suit, which a lot of people couldn't afford back then.
I think his big thing was most of his shops, if not all of them, had the billiards hall above the shop. So it drew the customers in.
He was a sharp guy, this Lithuanian Jew who came over in 1900. But it wasn't just that. It was also sort of these seductive catalogues.
Yes.
Look at how smart you can be. Look how marvellous you can look. And certainly wearing this suit, I'm sure you're the same. You do feel sort of proper.
Yeah, you do. Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, definitely.
So how much of your life has it taken over? I mean, you do reenactments, you say, but you seem to have so much more than just suits.
Yeah, I've sort of collected all the sort of collectibles that go with it, really, and anything that sort of interests me, and it's got displays the suits, and it's just love it.
You've got to have it.
Yeah, I have, really.
Do we think we're perhaps a little obsessed?
Yeah, a little bit maybe. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But there's a lot to get obsessed about. I mean, not only do you look sort of the sharpest cats in town, but just looking at the tailoring of these pieces. I mean, I can't help noticing the back on this suit. He really captured the style of the day.
Definitely. I mean, I mean, this suit here is a particular rare suit, British tailored by Burton's. It's more the back belt and the knife pleats are more of a common in American tailoring. This one's extremely rare, maybe probably about £500-600, maybe more on it. If someone really wanted it, they would pay maybe £1,000 plus.
maybe someone like you might pay £1,000. There's a big difference. I mean, you really are dedicated collectors, and I suppose for these pieces here, these mean more to you as a collector than perhaps they might fetch on the market. I mean, anything, I suppose, from 5 to sort of 10, maybe even up to £50 for a piece. So you've got a fantastic collection here that really is going to be, what, £1,200 to £1,800 worth, I suppose, plus the cut maybe up to £2,000. Hot property now, hot property of the future, but I can tell you one thing. I am boiling hot, and you must be too. So I think I'm going to go and change back out of this and hand it back. Thank you very, very much. Fantastic collection. Thank you.
Now, for those of us who think what sort of thing is this, it's a cigarette box.
That's right.
Made at a time when people still smoked. But this is made in around about 1900. Now, I know a little bit about it, but I'd like you to tell me a little more that I can add to. So, first of all, where's it come from?
Comes through my family. My grandfather received it. We were told in the family from the Tsar, but of course not directly, I'm sure. My grandfather was a metallurgist, and he was asked by the White Russians to go over and help sort out the guns that weren't firing straight, or I don't know quite what, but they weren't behaving themselves very well.
So when would that have been? About the time of Tsar Nicholas II, do you think?
Yes, it must have been the revolution.
Well, the White Russians, of course, they were loyal to the Tsar.
Yes.
They are fighting against the Bolsheviks, the Reds.
That's right.
And we all know what happened to the Tsar in 1917 when the revolution came. Well, let's have a look. It's made of silver. There's a little circular disc in the middle, and it is blue enamel decoration. And what enamel that is, because it's covered in this very smooth, almost wet, polished covering of royal blue.
Yeah.
And of course, when you look carefully, you see that the background to the blue are all these little individual wavy lines. It's quite a simple piece, really, as far as the construction is concerned. The middle, and you mentioned Russia, well, that's quite right, it's the Catherine the Great ruble.
That's right. Yes, I was always told it was
You were told that?
Yeah.
Let's look inside it, shall we? First of all, diamonds in this little lip.
That's
right. When I lift up the little lip, inside we have, which I'm really delighted to see more than anything else, is the original cigarette that's being left there.
Yes. Might need it one day.
Now, looking at the marks inside the box, just down here we see that there is a little stamp of a woman's head in profile called a kokoshnik, the Russian mark.
Oh, right.
The mark on the right of that has got a little tiny monogram, which is the work of a man called Holming.
Right.
Who was a craftsman working for Fabergé.
Yes.
And sure enough, on the right-hand side of that, the Fabergé stamp there. Very nice indeed. What do we like to see on the Antiques Roadshow?
Nice things.
And we like to see Fabergé.
Oh, do you?
So, of course, we love Fabergé. Of course we do. With one little teeny caveat.
Yes, I know.
What exactly happened there?
Well, my family didn't keep boxes, so it was only wrapped in a sort of soft cloth covering, and I shoved it into my little safe, which was rather small, a bit hard, and it sort of got knocked.
So, in other words, an absolutely pristine, perfect Fabergé box you shove into your safe. So there is a little bit of a defect in one corner, but not absolutely terrifying, because I think these days, with the sophistication of craftsmen and workshops, you could get that repaired, and it should be repaired as well. Has it been valued?
Years ago, when my father first gave it to me, 35 years ago, I took it to London and had it valued, and I was told it was worth £900. That was before it's damaged.
So in perfect condition it was valued at £900.
With more cigarettes in it, I may say.
With more cigarettes. So what's it worth today?
No idea.
6,000 to 8,000.
No! I'm amazed. Lovely. Amazing.
Do you remember the chap who told us earlier in the programme so movingly about his father, who he discovered was actually an American GI, and he only found out when he was in his 50s? Well, the other thing he showed me was this marvellous document. I want to show it to you. Over there, Instructions for American Servicemen in Britain, 1942. Presumably something his father read. There's two marvellous bits in it. First of all, the British are tough. The English language didn't spread across the oceans and over the mountains and jungles and swamps of the world because these people were panty wastes. And then, one other golden nugget of advice. When you see a girl in khaki or Air Force blue with a bit of ribbon on her tunic, remember, she didn't get it for knitting more socks than anyone else in Ipswich. How brilliant. These are rules you could live by. From Bowood House and the whole Antiques Roadshow team. Till next time, bye-bye.
It's back to 1805 next on BBC One. Pierre faces his own battle on the home front. Married life is not the bed of roses he'd hoped for in War and Peace.